Project Parallax. The Ripple in Time. Dr. Eli Voss sat in his lab, staring at the glowing screen before him, the equations of space-time theory cascading down the monitor in rapid succession. His fingers moved over the keyboard, adjusting variables and running simulations, but something was wrong. Something he couldn't quite grasp. The equations were unstable. At first, it was subtle, just a flicker in the data, a slight shift. But then it intensified. The very fabric of the numbers seemed to tremble, as if reality itself was being strained. Eli's breath quickened as he watched the ripple grow on his screen, a distortion spreading outward in a widening circle. His mind raced, trying to process what he was seeing. Was this a fault in the system? Or something more? He leaned forward, his heart pounding in his chest. A loud, low hum filled the air. He glanced at the wall-mounted monitors, noticing the lights flickering overhead. His hands flew to the console, attempting to stop the simulation, but it was too late. The ripple reached its peak. Suddenly, the ground beneath him trembled violently. Eli gripped the edge of his desk, staring in disbelief as the lights in the lab flickered once more before the world around him seemed to warp and bend. The walls stretched and twisted, the air vibrating with a pulse of unnatural energy. He could feel it, a deep, unsettling force invading the very space he inhabited. The screens blinked out, leaving only a single flickering image. Then the hum stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Before Eli could make sense of it, the floor beneath him cracked open. A blinding light poured through the fissure, and from the rupture, a fleet of dark, jagged ships descended into Earth's atmosphere. His heart skipped a beat. Eli rushed to the observation window, pressing his palm against the glass as he watched the alien ships position themselves in Earth's orbit, their presence an undeniable threat. They weren't the smooth, sleek crafts of science fiction. No, these ships were jagged, almost organic in appearance, as if grown rather than built. Panic surged through him. He had no idea how, but it was clear. The anomaly he had created wasn't just a disruption in space-time. It was a doorway. A voice crackled through his comm system. "Dr. Voss, you need to get out of there now. We're under attack." The military's warning was brief, but it hit Eli with the force of a freight train. He knew he had to move, but something held him in place. Something about the ships, about the ripples in space-time, felt deeply connected to him, as if he had summoned this calamity. He turned and ran toward the lab's exit. The building was already in chaos, military personnel scrambling to protect the facilities, technicians screaming into their radios, but none of them seemed to know what was truly happening. Eli's mind was a blur, but one thought stood out above the rest. He had to find out how his research connected to this invasion. As he ran through the hallway, Eli caught sight of the alien ships above through a reinforced window. He couldn't make out the full scope of the invasion, but one thing was clear. Earth was under assault. The first wave was descending. Troops, massive weapons, and a force so great it seemed to defy comprehension. He stumbled into a command center where military personnel were working feverishly. They barely acknowledged his presence. Their attention was on the displays showing the enemy ships, countless vessels filling the sky, positioning themselves for an assault. The atmosphere was tense, thick with fear and uncertainty. One of the generals turned to Eli. "We need your expertise, Doctor. You're the only one who might understand what's happening." Eli's chest tightened. "You have no idea what's going on," he said, his voice shaky. This is my fault. The anomaly, the ripple, it's not just some glitch in the system. It's from the future." The general stared at him, bewildered. "The future? What do you mean, the future?" Eli took a deep breath, gathering himself. "The anomaly I detected. It opened a doorway, a rift. And from that rift, they came." He motioned to the screen, showing the alien fleet. "The ripple is connected to them. Somehow, I created it. And they're not just any invaders. They're from the future. The general's expression darkened. "How do you know that?" "I've seen it. I've felt it." Eli struggled to explain, the words coming in stilted bursts. "I saw it in the data. These ships, the soldiers, they're not just invading to conquer Earth. They're here to rewrite time itself. They're from a future where humanity is losing, where everything we know is at risk." A sudden realization struck Eli. He stepped back, his face pale. "They think they can save their future by conquering our past. But it's not just Earth they're after. It's everything. The timeline." Eli stumbled through the smoke-filled hallway, his heart pounding in his chest. The explosion had rocked the building to its core, but that was nothing compared to what he had just seen. The army of soldiers had been bad enough, but the real horror lay in the figure who stood at the front of the enemy ranks. It was him, or rather, it was someone who looked exactly like him. "Dr. Eli Voss," the figure said coldly, stepping forward. "I have been waiting for you." Eli froze. The voice was his own, but the tone, there was no warmth in it. No humanity. Only an icy, calculating edge. Who are you?" Eli stammered, his mind racing. "I am you," the alternate Eli said, his lips curling into a smile that sent a shiver down Eli's spine. "But not the version you know. I chose a different path. A path that leads to victory, to control. And you, Dr. Voss, will help me complete it." The words hit Eli like a punch to the gut. His breath caught. This was a version of himself, a version who had chosen something darker. "You don't have to do this," Eli said, his voice trembling, even as his mind struggled to understand. "We can fix this. We can stop the invasion, reverse the ripple." The alternate Eli's eyes hardened. "Fix it? You don't understand, do you? This is the only way. I've seen countless timelines, countless futures where this moment was the key. Your moment. The moment where you create the ripple. And now we can use it. Together." The army behind him stirred, and Eli could feel the weight of their gaze. They weren't just soldiers, they were him. Versions of himself who had chosen different paths, different futures. "I didn't choose this," Eli shouted, stepping forward. "I never wanted any of this. I was just trying to understand the science of time." The alternate Eli's eyes glinted with cold amusement. "Science, you say? You think you're the only one who can control time? The ripple wasn't an accident. You were always meant to make it happen. You created the perfect opportunity for us to rise. And now you're going to join us. You will see the potential. Together, we can reshape history." Eli shook his head, trying to clear the fog in his mind. This couldn't be real. This had to be some twisted dream, a nightmare created by the anomaly. But the man standing before him wasn't a dream. He was real, and he was offering something that Eli couldn't ignore. Power. Control. The ability to fix the future by rewriting the past. But at what cost? "Why me?" Eli demanded, stepping back. "Why do you want me to join you? You already have everything you need. Why don't you just keep going without me?" The alternate Eli's smile faded, replaced by something more calculating. "Because you are the key. You're the one who created the ripple. You're the one who holds the power to either end it all or amplify it. Your choices in this timeline will shape the future of all timelines. We need you. I need you." A cold chill washed over Eli as he realized the full extent of the situation. This wasn't just an invasion. It was a war for control over time itself. His own actions, the choices he had made, had led to this moment. The ripple wasn't just a freak accident. It was the result of his own decisions. And now his alternate selves were fighting to control that power. Eli turned away, his mind racing. He had to find a way out of this, a way to stop it. But as he glanced back at the army of versions of himself, all with eyes that mirrored his own, he knew it wouldn't be easy. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about stopping himself. The alternate Eli took a step closer, his voice low and persuasive. "Think about it, Eli. You can have everything. Power, knowledge, control over the future. All you have to do is join us. With your genius, we could rewrite everything. We could save humanity from extinction. We could create a new world." Eli's mind whirled. How could he possibly trust this version of himself? He didn't know what kind of choices this Eli had made, what horrors he had chosen to embrace. The alternate Eli was right. His own research had opened the doorway. But what had he unleashed? What kind of power had he tapped into? "I won't join you," Eli said, his voice firm now, though his heart still raced with uncertainty. "This isn't the way. There has to be another way. A better way." The alternate Eli's eyes narrowed, his hand moving to the weapon at his side. "Then we will see if you're strong enough to stop me." With that, the alternate Eli signaled to his army, and the first wave of soldiers advanced. They moved with precision, their every step a reflection of the cold efficiency of the timeline they came from. Eli's mind raced. He had no choice but to fight. But how could he fight against himself? How could he stop versions of himself that were far more ruthless and decisive than the man he was now? The battle was inevitable. As the first soldiers of the future army charged, Eli knew that he had no choice but to fight for his life and for the future of the timelines. He reached for a nearby weapon, trying to steady his shaking hands. He had to survive this. He had to find a way to stop the alternate versions of himself from rewriting everything. The sound of weapons fire erupted in the air. The army of Eli's clones was closing in. Eli dove behind cover, breathing hard. He had to think, to plan. He couldn't keep running. He had to confront the consequences of his own actions. The battle raged on, chaos swirling around him. The sounds of gunfire and explosions echoed in the corridors, but Eli's focus remained fixed on one thing: the alternate version of himself who was leading the invasion. He had to stop him, to end this before it spiraled even further out of control. But as the battle wore on, another realization struck Eli. There were more versions of him out there, more alternate Elis, each one with different intentions, each one with their own twisted vision of how to reshape history. The fight was just beginning. With a final, desperate effort, Eli faced his alternate self one last time. But as the two versions of Eli clashed, something even darker loomed on the horizon. The understanding that the choices he made today would ripple through the timelines, and every version of himself was fighting for control. The fate of all timelines rested on the choices he made now. The ripple in time was only just beginning to show its true power. As Eli stands over the defeated form of his alternate self, he stares into the darkness ahead. More versions of himself, each one with a different plan, are still out there, and they are all fighting to rewrite history in their own favor. The air was thick with smoke, the taste of ash heavy in Eli's mouth. He had just barely escaped the onslaught of his alternate self's forces, but he knew the battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. As he ran through the crumbling corridors, the constant hum of time distortion echoed in his ears, a reminder of the ripple he had created. The world he knew was tearing apart, and it was all his fault. He reached a secluded room in the heart of the facility, his mind racing with the weight of everything he had learned. The soldiers he had fought weren't just part of one future army, they were different factions, each from a different timeline, all with their own version of Earth's future. Each one had a different vision, a different way of saving or destroying the planet. As Eli looked at the map spread before him, he could feel the ground shake beneath him. The ripple was fracturing time itself, pulling pieces of different eras into the present. The future armies weren't the only threats. Time itself was collapsing. He could see it with his own eyes. Ancient warriors fighting alongside futuristic soldiers, technology from past centuries clashing with weapons from an uncertain future. It was chaos, and Eli was caught in the middle of it. "We're losing," he muttered to himself, staring at the map. "Everything is falling apart." The door to the room suddenly slammed open. Eli whipped around, his pulse quickening, but it wasn't another soldier. It was a figure, another version of himself, standing in the doorway, eyes cold and calculating. "You can't run from this," the alternate Eli said, his voice steady. "You're not the only one who's been affected by the ripple, Eli. The future isn't just one place, it's many. And I've come to show you how deep this goes." Eli's mind raced as the words sank in. He had already faced versions of himself who wanted to control time, but this was something else entirely. Each faction had its own plan for humanity. Some wanted to save the world at any cost, while others sought to bring about its end. But all of them had one thing in common. They were versions of him, each shaped by different choices. "The future is fractured," Eli said, taking a step back. "But we can fix this. We can stop the ripple. We just need to." "You don't understand," the alternate Eli interrupted. "You think you can stop this. You can't. The ripple is already too deep. Time is unraveling. You're not fighting just for survival anymore. You're fighting for the very fabric of reality. The timelines are collapsing. And you're the key." The words hit Eli like a punch to the gut. He had known the ripple was dangerous, but he hadn't fully grasped just how bad it was. The future armies, his own versions of himself, were part of the problem. But they weren't the only problem. Time itself was unraveling, threatening to consume everything. "I never meant for this to happen," Eli whispered. "I didn't know." The alternate Eli stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "You never do you? That's the problem. Every choice you make ripples through time, and you never see the consequences. But now you're here, and now you'll have to fix it." Before Eli could respond, the sound of explosions echoed in the distance. The walls trembled as the ground shook beneath him. He rushed to the window, his heart sinking as he saw the chaotic scene outside. Soldiers from multiple timelines were clashing, their weapons tearing apart the landscape. Time was collapsing faster than he had realized. "This has to end," Eli said, his voice resolute. "But I can't do this alone." The alternate Eli smirked, his eyes narrowing. "You don't have a choice. You're in this now. We all are." With a sharp movement, the alternate Eli pulled out a small device, a glowing sphere that pulsed with energy. "This is the key, the only way to stop the war and the ripple." Eli's eyes narrowed. "What is it?" "It's a temporal stabilizer," the alternate Eli explained. "It's the only thing powerful enough to restore the balance, but using it comes with a cost. It will stop the ripple, but it will also erase everything, every timeline, every version of humanity. Only one timeline will remain, one future." Eli's mind spun. The implications of the device were unimaginable. It could end the chaos, but at what price? Was he willing to sacrifice all other versions of humanity just to save his own? "What happens to us?" Eli asked quietly. The alternate Eli's expression hardened. "You and I will cease to exist, but the timeline will be restored, history will be rewritten, and everything will return to normal. Or at least, that's what I hope." Eli stared at the device, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He had always been the scientist, the rational thinker. But now he was faced with a decision that no amount of equations or logic could solve. If he activated the stabilizer, he could stop the war, end the ripple, and restore the timelines. But he would be destroying everything he had ever known, including himself. As the alternate Eli raised the device, Eli took a step forward. He could feel the weight of the universe on his shoulders. He had no choice but to act. The ripple had already torn apart too much. Time was fracturing. The war across timelines couldn't go on. The alternate Eli's voice softened. "You were always destined for this, Eli. Your brilliance in physics, your choices, they were always going to bring you here. You may not like it, but you are the one who must choose." Eli's eyes burned with frustration. He had never felt so helpless, so trapped. Every choice he made led to more destruction, more chaos. It was as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling around him. "I can't make this decision," Eli whispered, his voice breaking. "I don't know what's right anymore." The alternate Eli stepped closer, his voice firm. "You don't have to. The choice is yours, but you're not alone in this. We all have to face the consequences of our actions. Now it's your turn." Eli's hands shook as he reached for the temporal device, his fingers brushing against its surface. The glow intensified, casting a harsh light across the room. He could feel the weight of the choice bearing down on him. "I have to stop it," Eli said, his voice resolute. "I have to make the choice." But as his fingers touched the device, a deafening crash sounded from above. The building shook violently, and Eli was thrown to the ground. The lights flickered and then went out, plunging the room into darkness. In the distance, he could hear the sound of gunfire, the screams of soldiers. The war was far from over. Eli struggled to his feet, his heart racing. As he reached for the device again, a shadow fell across him, blocking out the light. "Not so fast," a voice said, a voice that was unmistakable. Another version of Eli, one that was even more determined to rewrite history than the others. The room erupts into chaos as a new version of Eli steps forward, intent on stopping him from using the device. Eli must now decide whether to destroy the ripple and erase humanity's past or allow the future army to conquer the past. The fate of all timelines hangs in the balance. The air in the control room felt heavier now. The machine glowed dimly as Eli stood before it, torn between the choices that had been laid out before him. Each version of himself, each faction, each reality, they all pulled at him, demanding he make a decision that would either save or destroy everything he had ever known. But nothing seemed clear, and every step forward led to another unexpected twist. Eli was just about to touch the device again when a sudden, unnatural stillness filled the room. The hum of the machine stopped. For a moment, there was no sound at all, only silence. It was as if time itself held its breath. Eli turned sharply, his pulse quickening. Something, or someone, was in the room with him. Out of the shadows stepped a figure, cloaked in darkness. His face was obscured, but Eli could tell by the silhouette that it was another version of himself. This one was different, though, not just in appearance, but in essence. There was something about him that felt ancient, like a man who had lived too many lifetimes. "I've been waiting for you, Eli," the figure said, his voice calm, but carrying an unspoken weight. "You're running out of time." Eli's eyes widened. "Who are you?" The figure stepped into the light, revealing his face, an older, more weathered version of Eli Voss. But his eyes were sharp, and there was a quiet authority about him that Eli had never felt before. "Call me the architect," the older Eli replied, his tone grave. "I am the one who designed the paradox, and I'm here to show you the truth." Eli felt a chill run down his spine. The truth. The architect nodded. The ripple, the future army, the war. It's all tied together. But it's not about conquest. It's not about rewriting history. It's about survival. Your survival. Eli frowned, confusion and suspicion mixing in his mind. "I don't understand. What do you mean?" The architect raised a hand, his voice growing more intense. "You see, Eli, the ripple was not an accident. It was a necessary consequence of your own actions. And the future army, they are the product of a paradox that must be maintained, or the future itself will unravel. You can't destroy the ripple. It's the very thing that keeps the timelines intact." Eli's breath caught in his throat. "What are you saying? That the paradox is the only thing keeping the world from collapsing?" The architect's gaze never wavered. "Exactly. If the ripple is destroyed, the timelines will reset, yes. But what you don't understand is that it will erase all of humanity's history. The future, the past, everything will cease to exist, including you. The paradox keeps humanity alive. It keeps the future that you fought to protect from vanishing." Eli shook his head, trying to process this new information. So, you're saying I have to let the war continue? Let the future army conquer the past? No, the architect replied, his voice softening. There is a way to stabilize the timelines, but it requires a sacrifice. Eli's eyes narrowed. What kind of sacrifice? The architect's expression hardened. A painful one. A personal one. The very reason the future army exists is to prevent the paradox from destroying the future. You see, I am the future version of you. I already made the sacrifice. My actions, my choices, were what created the ripple. The war, the army, it all came from me. The future army exists because of what I did. Eli's heart sank. You created this war. You're the reason everything's falling apart. The architect's gaze softened, and he took a slow step forward. I didn't have a choice. I had to make the decision that would ensure humanity's survival. But I could never have anticipated how it would spiral out of control. Now you are the only one who can stop it. But to stabilize the timeline and prevent everything from collapsing, you must make the same sacrifice I did. You must let go of everything you know and accept the future that has been created. Eli stared at the architect in disbelief. You're telling me I have to give up everything? My past, my future, everything that makes me who I am. The architect's voice was steady, but there was a quiet sadness in his words. Yes, but it is the only way. The ripple must be contained, or else the paradox will continue to fracture the timelines, leading to a future where humanity never existed. There is no other option. Eli stepped back, his mind a swirl of conflicting emotions. The weight of the decision felt impossible. The future army, the paradox, his own existence, all of it depended on this one choice. Could he really do it? Could he sacrifice everything to save the future? Was he willing to erase his own timeline to preserve humanity's? You don't have much time, the architect warned. The longer you wait, the harder it will be to stop the collapse. The future is slipping away. Eli felt the weight of the choice pressing on him, suffocating him. In front of him was an impossible decision. Sacrifice his future self to stabilize the timeline, or risk losing everything, including the future of humanity itself. For a long moment, there was only silence between them. Eli could hear his own breath, shallow and fast, his heart pounding in his chest. His fingers twitched toward the temporal device, but his mind screamed at him to hesitate. Was this the right path? Could he trust this version of himself? Finally, Eli found his voice, hoarse with uncertainty. If I sacrifice myself, will the future army stop? Will the war end? The architect nodded gravely. Yes, the paradox will be resolved. But the price will be steep. You will lose everything. And the person you are now, Eli, will cease to exist. Your history will be rewritten, and you will be forgotten. Eli's gaze dropped to the device. The light flickered as time seemed to stretch, each moment more agonizing than the last. He could feel the weight of the entire multiverse on his shoulders. Is there any other way? Eli asked quietly, his voice barely a whisper. The architect's expression remained unreadable. No. Eli swallowed hard, his hand hovering over the device. This was it. There was no going back. The future, his future, depended on what he chose in this moment. Eli must now make the ultimate decision. Sacrifice his future self to stabilize the timeline, or let the ripple continue, risking the destruction of humanity's future. Every timeline, every version of reality, now hung in the balance. The battle had raged for hours, but Eli barely noticed the passing time. The air was thick with the sound of explosions, the deafening roar of energy weapons colliding with shields, and the cries of soldiers fighting for their very survival. The future army had come to Earth, bringing with them versions of Eli. Versions who had made different choices, who had been molded by time into beings he could barely recognize. Each one of them had a stake in the future, and each one was determined to rewrite history in their favor. But this was different. Eli's heart pounded in his chest as he looked across the battlefield. Among the chaos, A figure stood alone. Tall, imposing, and impossibly familiar. His face was an older version of Eli's, but there was something unnerving about his eyes. Something cold and calculating, a glimmer of something darker than Eli had ever seen in his own soul. His future self. Eli's breath caught in his throat. He had known this day was coming, but the reality of facing himself, his greatest adversary, his own future, was a nightmare he had not prepared for. The two versions of Eli locked eyes, and in that moment, everything around them seemed to fade. The battlefield, the explosions, the soldiers, all of it vanished. There was only the future and the past. There was only them. "You're too late," the future Eli said, his voice booming through the silence. "I've already won." Eli swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. He was exhausted, drained, and yet his mind raced. This wasn't just a fight for Earth. It was a fight for time itself. "No," Eli replied, his voice tight but resolute. "It's not too late. I'll stop you." Future Eli chuckled darkly. "You don't understand, do you? This war, this paradox, it's all part of the plan. We've already set the course. You're just a pawn, Eli. A piece of a puzzle that's already been solved." Eli's mind reeled. He had never wanted to be a part of this war, never wanted to be the cause of it. But now, standing in front of the person who had chosen the paradox, he realized that the stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined. The future army wasn't just trying to conquer the past, it was trying to preserve its own existence. And in doing so, it was threatening to erase the very fabric of reality. "You're wrong," Eli said, though his voice shook with uncertainty. "This isn't the answer. You're destroying everything." Future Eli's eyes darkened. "No, I'm saving it. I'm saving all of us. The paradox must continue or the timelines will collapse. We don't have a future without it." Eli took a step forward, his fists clenched at his sides. "I'll stop you. I won't let you destroy everything." The two Elis squared off, their eyes locked in a fierce battle of wills. And then, as if by some unspoken command, the ground beneath them trembled. The air hummed with energy. A ripple ran through the battlefield, and suddenly, the two versions of Eli were pulled into a time loop, each fighting not just for the future, but for control of the very timeline that bound them together. The battle moved in and out of focus, each strike, each move, a blur of light and motion. Eli's body ached, his mind struggled to keep up, but his determination never wavered. He had to win. He had no choice. The fate of time itself hung in the balance. As the fight raged on, Eli began to notice something. His movements, his tactics, they were too predictable. The future army, his future self, they were anticipating every move he made, every decision he took. It wasn't just the paradox he was up against. It was something much worse. He was being manipulated. His future self wasn't just trying to destroy the past. He was orchestrating this war, pulling the strings from the shadows. Eli's pulse quickened as the realization hit him. He was being played. Everything he thought he knew, everything he had fought for, was part of a larger plan. The future army's goal wasn't just survival, it was domination. The paradox, the ripple, it was all a means to an end. And Eli, in his fight to save the past, was unknowingly helping them. "You're nothing but a puppet," future Eli sneered, his voice filled with disdain. "All your efforts, all your choices, they were always meant to lead to this. You'll never be able to stop it." Eli felt a surge of frustration, but deep down, he knew his only chance was to break free from this cycle, to outsmart his future self and stop the war once and for all. But how? How could he defeat an enemy who knew every move he would make, every strategy he would employ? Then, in the midst of the chaos, Eli noticed something. Something small, yet crucial. The ripple in time was weakening. The timeline was fracturing even further, unraveling in ways he had never seen before. And in that moment, Eli realized the truth. The paradox wasn't just a tool for survival. It was a weapon, a way to control the future. He couldn't let it continue. If he did, the entire world, the past, the present, the future, would cease to exist. But if he destroyed the ripple, he would be erasing humanity's history, everything that had ever been. There was no easy answer. Enough, Eli shouted, pushing himself forward with everything he had left. He could feel the energy building, the weight of the entire multiverse pressing down on him. He had to make his stand now, before it was too late. Future Eli's expression twisted into a cruel smile. "You'll never win. Time will always be on my side." Eli's hand moved instinctively to the device he carried, the key to ending this madness. But as he reached for it, he felt a surge of doubt. Could he really destroy the ripple? Could he really sacrifice everything? The ground beneath him cracked open, and suddenly he was pulled into another time loop, a chaotic vortex of alternate realities, each one a reflection of the war he had fought so desperately to prevent. Every version of himself, every faction, every timeline was converging on this one moment. And in that moment, Eli knew the truth. The war wasn't just about Earth. It wasn't just about the future. It was about the very nature of existence itself. And as the final battle raged around him, Eli understood that the stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined. The war is about to come to a head. Eli must make a final stand to prevent the future from conquering the past, but in doing so, he risks losing everything he's ever known. Time is slipping through his fingers, and the fate of reality itself is in his hands. Will he be able to stop the future army and save humanity, or will the paradox tear everything apart? The final decision looms. The battlefield had gone silent, the echoes of war fading into a haunting stillness. Eli stood alone, surrounded by the remnants of his past, present, and future. The countless versions of himself, the armies from every timeline, were no more. Everything had led to this moment, the final choice, the final battle. And the weight of the decision was crushing. He had faced countless challenges, fought against alternate versions of himself, and struggled with the paradox that threatened to tear reality apart. But now, at the precipice of it all, Eli knew the truth. He was the key to ending this nightmare, the key to stabilizing the timelines. But the price would be unimaginable. To stop the paradox, to erase the war, to restore order, he would have to make the ultimate sacrifice. For the first time in his life, Eli was forced to look at the true cost of what he had done. The ripple, the anomaly in time, had been caused by his own actions, but it was also the only way to fix everything. It was paradoxical, but it was the only solution. If he didn't collapse the timeline now, if he didn't take that final step, the future would continue its endless cycle of destruction. The solution was simple in theory. He had to erase all versions of himself, all versions of humanity, from the timeline. He had to create a new world, one free from the paradox, one where the ripple never existed. But the cost was unbearable. In doing so, Eli would cease to exist. Every choice he had made, every battle he had fought, every sacrifice he had endured, would vanish. He would be nothing but a memory, a ghost in a world that never knew his name. As he stood at the edge of the Parallax solution, Eli couldn't help but think of all the lives he had touched, of the family he had never known, the friends he had never made, the world he had once fought to protect. He would never be able to return to them, never be able to see the future he had hoped for. The weight of the decision crushed him, and for a moment, Eli wondered if there was any other way. But deep down, he knew there wasn't. "This is the only way," Eli whispered to himself. His voice barely rose above the hum of the energy building around him, the energy of the ripple. "If I don't do this, nothing will survive." His hand reached for the device at his side, the key to activating the Parallax solution. It was a strange piece of technology, something that had been created by his future self, a self that had already made this choice. The device hummed with a strange power, and Eli could feel its energy coursing through him. the weight of the decision growing heavier with each passing second. As his fingers brushed against the device, Eli took one final look around him. The battlefield was empty now, the destruction and chaos a distant memory. There was no turning back. With a deep breath, Eli pressed the button. Time shattered. The air around him seemed to distort, to twist and bend in ways that defied reason. The ripple, the paradox, began to collapse, pulling everything into a single point, a singularity that threatened to consume everything. The timelines fractured and merged, the very fabric of reality bending under the strain. Past, present, and future collided, creating a world that was neither one nor the other. And then, everything stopped. Eli felt the ripples of time surrounding him, pulling at the very core of his being. He could feel his past slipping away, his future disappearing, his identity dissolving into nothingness. He was letting go of everything he had ever known. There would be no memory of him, no trace of his existence. Eli Voss would be nothing but a forgotten dream. As the energy of the Parallax solution coursed through him, Eli felt a strange peace. This was his choice. This was the only way to save the world. And though he would never know the outcome, though he would never see the world he had fought to protect, he knew it would be better off without him, without the ripple, without the war. He was the price of salvation. The world began to reassemble, slowly, quietly, as if nothing had ever happened. The timelines were restored, the war was over, and humanity's future was safe once again. But Eli was gone. The world continued on without him, as if he had never existed. Ending. The dust settled, the last remnants of the battle fading away. The world was intact. Time was whole again. But as people began to move forward, as they rebuilt the world Eli had fought to save, a lingering question hung in the air. Did Eli truly save the world, or had he erased himself from existence to ensure the future? The answer would never be known. For in the end, Eli was no more, but his sacrifice would echo through time, forever unspoken, forever remembered, in the world that continued without him. And thus, the paradox was solved.